Hello, my name is Kate Lowald. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Playco's founding producer. On behalf of everyone at Playco, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Meriti, a showcase by Katlego Kai Kolanyane-Kesupile that will share her process of making a play during her residency with us these past 4 months. This event is part of a series of events that culminate Playco's residency program for Black women theater makers. We hope you'll join us for all of these presentations to meet all 4 artists and learn about their work. You can find information about the residency program and all the events on our website. Also, we're recording all of them, and they'll be available to stream on our website until October 8th. We at Playco start all of our public events with a land acknowledgement, and I'd like to share that with you now. The Play Company is based in New York City. Our office in Manhattan, as well as the rehearsal, performance, and other spaces where we work in New York City are located on the Lenape-Hoking homeland of the Lenape people. Lenape-Hoking is the Lenape name for Lenape land, which spans western Connecticut to eastern Pennsylvania and the Hudson Valley to Delaware, with Manhattan at the center. We recognize that this land was forcibly taken and sovereignty was never ceded. We acknowledge the genocide and displacement of indigenous peoples. We honor the past, present, and future generations of the Lenape and all indigenous people who have stewarded the land, water, and air we occupy. We call upon the people who inhabit the Lenape-Hoking today to join us in learning this history, celebrating the present Lenape community, and becoming better stewards of Earth. We also acknowledge the African people who were enslaved and whose labor built Manhattan during the colonial era and beyond. We acknowledge the harm inflicted upon the indigenous communities and people of color across this country. We recognize that this public acknowledgement is only one step in the ongoing process of honoring and supporting these communities. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Katlego Kai Kolanyane-Kesupile, or Kat, and Meriti. Kat is an international award-winning cultural architect, development practitioner, and interdisciplinary artist from Botswana. Her work in human rights, education, and communications centers decoloniality, feminism, and disability theory. She is a classically trained singer and composer, theatrical performer, and designer. Her published writing ranges from contemporary critiques, creative work in poetry, music, and theater, and scholarly research. She's the founding director of the Queer Shorts Showcase Festival, Botswana's premier LGBTQ-themed theater festival, for which she has written numerous works and mentored performers and writers, and the founder of the Writers Meet Social Club. Meriti is a new absurdist, bilingual, Afrofuturist exploration of modes and tactics of managing grief, a meditation on bridging the performative and personal domains of feeling and living. You will hear both English and Setswana languages. The presentation will have 3 parts: a video introducing the world of the play and the creative process, a live staged reading of an excerpt of the play showing the opening 2 scenes, and a short live directing exercise where Kat will be working on some new pages with the cast to share a sense of their process in real time. And then we'll have some time for your questions. And now, Meriti.
I'm Katlego Kai Kolanyane-Kesupile, writer and director of Meriti.
I am Laura Sekwababe, and I'm playing the role of Meriti.
I'm Anna Kitlaring, and I'm playing the character Heidi.
Hi.
I'm Zanella Moyo, and I am playing the character Peetso.
I am Tefo Umpile Paya, and I am playing the part of Nkoke.
I am Lebogang Jessica Kilemang, stage manager for Meriti.
Oh yeah.
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 So it's your responsibility to get us on so that we can do the thing. In the same way that we're potentially siding with Peto, but also we're just like Peto. Hi Laura, how are you?
Hi, Kat. I'm well, thanks.
Good. So the first question I'd like to get your response to is around the world of the play. What is your impression of the world of the play? How is your experience of the world of the play as it is so far that you know?
My impression, it's literally everything that you... I mean, initially when you described that it's an in-limbo space for people who are kind of moving between grief and in the afterlife, I didn't really get what that meant. But now that we're seeing it and putting it together, that space makes a bit more sense. And the experience of it, it's different for each person, for each character. And even for my character, that isn't necessarily a person, but a kind of a being. You know, my character, Meriti, is still experiencing this space differently from everybody else. So.
The world of the play is very interesting, very intriguing, because it touches base on, well, metaphorically, touches base on what is happening right now with the world, where we are mentally. And somehow I kind of relate and resonate with the other characters. I see a bit of myself here, a bit of that and everything. So it's been really interesting.
So the world of the play for me, as you can see, there's a lot going on with it, and it's a challenge actually, because I've dealt with absurdism before, but now this one being with the original, author, and also one that's just got Setswana, and it's speaking back to what's happening currently. So it's not like from back then, which is something we studied academically. Now it's a lived experience. I'm finding it very challenging in terms of not trying to be too direct with it, but also allow for the magic and the absurd side of absurdism to come out, and also as an artist to still craft and find a performance in it. So playing with those words and then the depth of the words, and not trying to hang too much on the depth of the words and keep them light. So all that, there's so many challenges, there's so many things there that are constantly poking. And I'm enjoying that, because for me, I always relish the opportunity of being challenged. Constantly. I hate comfort zones. And also overall, COVID, the idea of loss, grief, it's been challenging. And personally, I've never lost this many people close to me in such a short space of time. And it's just been, how do you deal with it? And those shadows that are being cast, and then being within the piece itself. For me, there's a lot going on there, and it still forces you to be on the surface with it, as if you're not carrying this heavy thing with you. So it's really challenging, and I'm enjoying that, yeah.
And the two languages, the play happens in in the two languages of Setswana and English.
Yes.
How has that working within those two languages as a modality been for you?
I think it's a lot better for me to relate, being Motswana, and I mean I'm very comfortable with the Setswana language, so it's made it a lot easier, and it works, both of them. I feel it's very relatable.
So I definitely say the lost in translation type thing, and because it's absurd, I'll definitely say it's lost in translation. So I get lost in the translation. So there's some things I access much easier, whether it's Setswana or English. But then now when I flip to the other language to keep that consistent thread, it's jarring again. But also shows you that the situation is jarring. Nothing about it is easy or comfortable. So for me, that finding different ways of expressing things in the two different languages, because Setswana in its descriptive sense, it's not direct, and then English is clear, it states what it states.
How are you finding that?
It should be a plus that I speak both languages, but honestly, alternating and changing kind of like, I don't know, it kind of messes me up a little bit. I kind of sometimes rush through some of the lines because, I mean, it's Setswana, I know this language very well, and at times I have a problem with my English, not being able to pronounce certain words properly, asking questions, so it's been such a struggle. I've noticed that I'm a little bit better in my Setswana because it's my comfort zone. And the English that I'm comfortable with is not the English that we're doing here.
It's just about making sure you get it right and you pronounce it well enough for somebody else to hear it.
So ideally it's about the communication of the language and not so much just the using of the language.
Yes, because you don't really realize how much we rely on kind of our expressions and a whole bunch of other elements. So now when you have words put in front of you and you have to deliver them in a specific way to get a specific reaction or result, that's very different because you don't realize that you're not that conscious of your tone when you speak generally because you have all these other things assisting you, all these other elements assisting you.
And also technically, the mouth, the placement within the mouth, how do you actually pronounce words and say them? It's easier to articulate English, and then Setswana is more challenging. And naturally you don't articulate that. So there's also those wonderful moments, and it's about finding that balance.
I honestly love just how we're merging two languages together. It's a new world, it's a new age. We should be able to have plays in Setswana that are written by Botswana, so we don't really see that a lot. So it's actually really interesting having to see how that kind of works. And honestly, it really flows. At some points, it feels like this is something that I would say. It just kind of flows, the lines are flowing. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It's very relatable.
And with your character Peetso, what would your expectation or hope be for somebody who is like Peetso in this world today?
That's a difficult one.
If you had any advice for them, what would it be?
To Peetso, keep writing. Keep writing.
So what would your hope for someone like that be right now, and how is that affecting or assisting you in crafting a way to understand the character?
One, get over yourself. Like genuinely, I think the current situation is forcing people to really get over self, get over egos, get over blocks. I may be saying it this way, but I'm not saying that it's easy. But it kind of forces you to confront the true self. You can't no longer hide behind a facade or claim. You really got to engage with your own insecurities, fears. You're forced to face it. And on top of it, get over yourself. Let it go. Right? Just let it go in terms of the defense, the walls we put up. You got to let that go, and we see each other as human beings. And I think that'll be the last level of humility. That I'm hoping that these characters, once they get over themselves and once they just let go of these things that COVID has shown us don't really matter, that we hold on to, the rigid way of working and being, or how society is structured, or how you're supposed to be in terms of your role and identity, which is all borrowed from a system that is completely outdated. And actually we should throw away systems and go back to just humbling ourselves that we're human beings and we can connect with you, just approach someone openly, unassuming, and then allow them to be open. And how do we connect?
For somebody who is a Khadi in this particular world right now, what would you hope for them as a person?
Honestly, I'd hope that they would open up a little bit more, kind of let that guard down, because Khadi is very much, I can do this by myself. I don't need nobody's help. I don't need nobody actually. Like, people are always going to disappoint you. But in actual life, sometimes you always need a support system. So it's okay to just let yourself be vulnerable for like a second or two. There's really nothing wrong with that. And it kind of really helps with like the whole process of you healing. It is an amazing thing that people really take for granted. And if somebody is going through that whole either grieving or going through a situation, it would really help if you can just like take a moment and talk about it.
Be for them? What would your advice be for them in weathering these times?
I think in my heart I believe Meriti is also has an element of like is a bit omnipotent. Like so all-knowing. So I think in these times, she wouldn't be needing much advice. Well, they wouldn't be needing much advice, actually. They wouldn't be needing much advice because they understand that this is momentary. There's so much more to life. But I think Meriti would be the one giving advice to people. And the advice that she would give to people is that there actually is more to life. Just kind of figure yourself out and be sure of yourself.
And then for me, that's the thing about it, that loss, you get in touch so much with the pain that you can't lie about it or fake it anymore. And so what this means is an idea of love. And that's the big thing I see about love, is at the end of the day, it's vulnerable, it's open, but it's beautiful, and you just gotta connect with people. So I hope that's what happens, that they get over themselves, they wake up, and they just humble themselves to life and really appreciating life for what it is.
And there are ways to cope with grief. There are ways to cope with what's going on right now. Find the ways that work best for you so that you can move on, because post-COVID is going to be a thing. We're not sure, you might not be sure what it looks like, but it's a thing, it's going to be a thing at least, and you need to be prepared for what's to come.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How's it going so far?
I'm finding it an interesting process in that learning, it's revisiting what it is to serving as a writer and a director is always a difficult thing. And now to in the space as the writer, and then having to be honest and kind enough as the director to work with the cast rather than be with the cast as the writer has been quite a challenge. But
Which one are you hating more right now?
neither. I very rarely hate the creative process. I like the working of it. It is not something that I would not want to happen, because I understand that it has to happen. And if I could, I would spend the next year just working on rehearsing the show, as opposed to trying to get to some kind of end product of it.
Have you made as much progress as you thought you were going to make in this time?
Not really, but it's not without merit. It is because, again, recognizing that we're working with a genre that requires time. And that's been the one thing that I've been most appreciative of, is that learning and finding the patience to work through, rather than like to storm and just say, okay, it needs to be finished. Because unfortunately, if you don't give something this technical the space to be understood, it will then, it's going to lose itself, it's going to lose you, and then you're just going to end up with a mess. So I'm happy that there's been a steady movement towards a positive, rather than just saying, oh, we've got a thing, and then patting ourselves on the back and only coming up with a cacophonous mess. Cacophony is such a good word, isn't it? I should put it into one of the characters' mouths.
Meriti, written and directed by Katlego Kai Kolanyane-Kesupile. Characters: Reed, youthful yet with a measured gait and weighty comportment. Clyde, early 20s, possibly effervescent, wears a functional outfit fit for manual labor in pastel colors. Tate, early 30s, stoic yet weathery, non-committal yet tender. Ngodi, early 40s, sprightly yet with a disposition of desperation. C, a cafe in a train station in Limbo. Time, present. Setting, a modest cafe with a faint warm tone, Afro-Caribbean beachside town aesthetic, with the trimmings of train station paraphernalia. Three yet mismatched tables stand in the main area right of center. Each has two chairs, also mismatched. Upstage is a wall with two doors on either side of the service counter. The stage right door leads to the kitchen, and the stage left door, with the sign that has been painted over along with the door, leads to a storeroom. A fridge stands between the upstage left door and the counter stands. A small raised platform is in the upstage left corner of the room, near a window in the stage left wall. A small stool stands on the platform with a watering can, tambourine, an overturned metal flower pot, and a small magazine bag laid about on it. Downstage of the window is the door that leads from the general station. The upstage right is a partition perpendicular to the kitchen door that screens the door to the restrooms, marked out by a sign jutting from the stage right door. A series of posters, mass-produced landscape artworks, and a cloudy mirror nabbed on the stage right wall around a manual jukebox. Downstage left, as in outside the cafe, stands an old standing phone booth. The perspex sides have been scratched and written on. Old posters have been ripped off, but there is a sheer circle. At rise. The downstage table lies on its side. A saucer, paper napkins, salt and pepper shakers, and a wet newspaper lie on the floor in the street. A ukulele lies on the center stage table. The sound of machinery and nondescript announcements can be heard. Neither is heard whistling and humming, but can't be seen. C1. Today.
And I don't suppose anyone's given much thought to it. No one actually stops around. I got off. I think about Najan. And if I get these sorts of things, yeah, but right, what in particular? But all the same, all the does it actually matter? That's what should be on the mind. Or at least a mind somewhere. A mind! I have half a mind if I could keep track of the comings and goings of things. I'm so quick to forget things, even when they're right there. One day, with the right mind, you'll get tired of the same song. Else it would. My luck. On my life, I would have jumped. Jumped. Perhaps there are better words. Better words. When then? When what? Will you have time to think of a better way to express this? Words are fleeting. Like a perfectly timed first sip of a cup of Java. If only. Good. You got it. I was afraid you'd lose it. It would take for something to be lost in me. I have failed after all. Knew it too deeply. What's that of a shame? The cup is still warm. And you are right. Where it comes, it'll stay between us.
There is no one else.
Not that we can see, not that we can hear.
Let me get that.
Ow! Covering!
My luck.
I'd help.
See, Faith.
Mimamon.
How did you name?
Well, that's what I get my looks. But I've seen time.
Not a single scratch or chip.
It's been time, I guess.
But I'm there.
Yeah, how they? I'm so gonna recollect a little.
And he reaches for the cloth with a hand holding the wet newspaper. Pauses, slaps it under her arm, and draws with her waist as she grabs the cloth from him. Neatly dust off their hand on their apron before pulling out a dishcloth from the pocket. A gratified smile appears on their face. Teddy first wipes down the newspaper, then wipes under her arm where she got wet. She pauses and her shoulders slump forward. Neatly whistles while they twirl the dishcloth.
Hakuna kusol. Akipindi cha kati.
None for me.
What?
Sayaka. Me not spam by
Nonsense! I'm in the business of service. No cup shall go unfilled.
But the time they go away when they are full, I enter them right away.
A great thirst is healthy.
Live by little, not even a little bit. But who's got this if you don't? Huh? Who's got this if you don't? You've got this, you've got that, polar rabbit got that. Great.
Ow! Shame!
What?
Shame!
Yours?
Mine? No.
Who's there?
What?
Here. What is it?
What?
What is it?
A tissue.
I guess I'm not the only one there.
A fresh one. Can I get a fresh one? So, has all the diseases.
I am using them.
Then they'll be dirty by now.
Have you been timing me?
What?
Then how would you know?
I assumed
That's not good.
you need help.
I've got it.
How to sit as a babuhan? Rihanna, the boy. You're not helping yourself here.
I get to it if you went here.
Trying to help.
Unasked.
It's only fair.
I've got this.
Listen from where I'm standing.
You're standing. Huh. You must be short then.
Figure of speech.
Ah, you're the floral type.
Floral?
You can't hear and I can't see. Okay.
I can hear just fine.
You're literal, Jamu.
I won't talk to Rihanna, the boy. If not for anything, just to get you out.
I got down by myself. I think I can get up just fine.
Kawuboni. What if there's something sharp?
Like what?
None. A shark's tooth.
They grow back.
Khalas.
In anything, hot tea. That's why I'm not stained.
It would be telling.
Why do you do that?
In
Move!
nature,
Rocks don't move.
not that you anything. How fancy.
Shoot, please.
At least get up. How to so bad? Kasi the one na home. Ow! Shame.
How about
Homo I go.
remote chromosome? You're touching me.
What a quaint little cafe. Must be it.
Getting down. Every time I get back, I want none of it. Not for being better than a stinking rock. Not for being better than a soggy feather. Let me tell you, how you know about time? How you come? When you get the regular what is the use?
Wait.
No. Not a guard or a maid. Nothing?
As I am. Nothing. Simple. People on the campus say I
Still, I heard you come in.
People is.
Still.
If you do not get up, I will leave. Who will help baby then?
Is it time?
Come, Hasil.
I do. I do it?
Not quite.
But close yet.
You'd not be the first.
It
And it would go still.
would be gone with me.
That's not how it works. Diatama wasa.
I'll do it anyway. And then because
With bright colors and loud noises.
Mukiti all color your
Confetti.
enough of that word.
Resting. Better for the birds.
Who did back then? Just my some friends. Huh.
Liba tupatinete.
Bankapeka.
And the press would steam up with it.
Perhaps.
And they'd call you Victoria.
Perhaps. But what?
Hukabala. I saw them once call someone a Victor. Only to find that wasn't his name.
Perhaps not. They still see you though.
But they'd be wrong.
They won't be the first.
You wouldn't mind.
It would be my time.
Sometime.
Soon, I hope. It's been so long.
As long as you think.
What if you fail?
A feeling then.
Unreliable.
What do you think? Huh?
You're back then.
From where? Good Lord!
Has the phone rang then? No.
Lovely. We still have time. Huh?
Time. I said they still probably go.
I almost jumped.
Jumped. What's unbelievable?
What? I thought there was no one else here. You're new.
Wasn't here before you left.
Come on. I can't have been long. Who knows? You don't work here?
I do.
Not you.
Really? I don't?
No, you.
I do.
I see that now.
Good. We all see.
This is too much. Moving shadows. I almost jumped.
I'm yet to see it.
My nerves.
Luena, have tea then.
Will that be 3?
I guess. I've got time.
C2. Tomorrow. Kettle sits at the downstage left table facing the jukebox. They have a few pamphlets on the table that take breaks to jot down in a different notebook from the previous day. Heidi is by the jukebox looking through the song list. Every so often, she pauses as if trying to remember the tune of the song. Weezy is behind the counter, playing with a glass of water. Their gaze is on the telephone. The ukulele is on the right. Nothing has changed about their appearances.
Funny how the monsoon season dictates when some places are available to visit.
Do the people leave then? Orejan, available to visit? As if there's a mass exodus, mass departure of everyone.
Yeah, the people who stay back.
Then they're available.
Miss Away.
Where would you be coming from?
What?
What guy?
Does that matter?
It does.
I don't know. Anyway.
But where?
Hopefully.
Except from there.
Not if you are there already, of course.
What about returning?
That's not what I'm talking about.
What are you talking about?
Visiting.
Monsoons.
Meta.
The people, to be exact.
The visitors.
And those who never leave?
They are used to it.
Jano, Babatamayan, and then return.
Are they visitors then?
That's my point.
I thought your point was about monsoons.
In the Kibua, Gaba, to Lematero.
Places they visit.
Hey.
Not places they stay.
No, you said that.
And do you stay here, Heidi?
Not here. No.
But you've not left.
How long has it been?
I don't know. Ask this one.
How would I know?
You've been writing for a while.
You have. When was the last time you first wrote? When was the last time you first wrote here?
What?
The last time you first wrote here.
I'd say yesterday. It can't have been today because well, I'd say it was yesterday. That's why.
You'd say it, but would that make it true?
What reason would I have to lie?
Still, you take it as good?
Probably.
Before you were on the floor.
Yes.
You had pepper in your nose.
Oh, shame.
And then your eyes, and you couldn't see anything.
Then you couldn't hear.
No. I could, like now.
And you helped?
I tried. Without guessing, I'd say I tried. It was no use at first. I was not quite tired, but I was certainly not fresh.
And the tea?
In the Morago and before, I guess.
Pepper and a tea party.
I'm having a party! Yes. That would be nice. Something to liven things up.
I'll be the music.
Music will be great.
I'll pump.
Hey, Milanyana, Palestine.
I'll pump the best songs that ever were.
You remember?
I never forget. You've met me, haven't you?
Again, for once. You didn't jump. Didn't fall off my chair either.
You're sitting.
Yeah, no one's fun there. No. I'll come to you. Take up a seat anywhere. Or stand. That wouldn't be advisable.
You're being literal.
Yeah, the time I suppose.
You can't trust me, not to joke at least.
Hey, wait, I'll take that on advisement.
I'm not neat. That would be me, I'm afraid. So, will that be a cup of tea? Make it easy.
Actually, I guess.
It's no use.
Will that be long?
Who knows?
Wait, I'm sorry. Grandma.
It.
Hey,
Yes.
I'm organic.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not too long, but this place seems to have popped out of nowhere.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
Hey, what's the job?
Goodness, Kana lo bala na
Possibly
literally.
of the needle. It's the eye.
A what?
The eye of the needle, not the hole.
They are hard to see. Yes, nothing like those of schools.
I suppose. The comparison is vast.
Careful would know better. That's what they were preaching about. A storm stopped them from going to visit.
Monsoons.
Oh, really? Where were you off
No,
to? No. Where?
no, no way.
Ah, I thought you were talking about one of the four. Don't ask me how I know there are four.
How do you know they are four?
It probably has something to do with a quiz event. You see, it's like something in a monana, so when quizzes came to my knowledge, their knowledge, I guess, stopped. But of course, you know what I mean. You look at all that you are, eh? Come on, like the one in the simple study couple, yeah? Well, you would know what I know about the nose.
Assumption.
That's not good.
Your words.
Leads you down a dirty path, which goes into another dirty path. And the next thing you know, you're stuck in the rear and you don't know how to borrow yourself out.
Like a rat.
So, not completely without cause.
If you're a rodent.
It's all
Another assumption.
This one will count you up and down,
I see.
even when you can't. It's real, that will.
Something, you would be too illegal.
Human Mahara does it all the time.
All the time.
For as long as it's easy.
Has that been long?
Well, I to tell. Not before you shot through that door, heads or heads crept in. And before that, it was just the two of us.
I didn't creep.
It felt like it.
You hardly remembered then. How can you remember now?
They are not the same, are they?
Times or your memories? Or are you just running on feelings?
None, actually. It feels like I'm running on air.
And that tea is running right through me.
Shall I get that squeak?
I can't want to go man.
I can get it.
But you don't know what's inside.
The way you've been waving it about, it doesn't look like anything that would break my back.
Wow. Because it doesn't matter how. It seems you've done that with me.
Is it not an assumption for you to tell me that I assumed?
And scene.
Hello again. I just want to say thank you to the cast and to Kat and to the whole company for Meriti for that performance and for the video. It was amazing to share that from here in New York. So thank you. Just a few words of introduction for this next part. When my colleague Charlene Adiambo and I first got to meet with Kat last spring, Kat shared her interest in using the residency to create a piece exploring how we grieve. And we talked about the need to make space and time for grieving and how theater might contribute to the ways people think about and experience this process. Meriti is a work in progress, and this residency program is very much about process. So now we have a special opportunity to be in the space in Botswana, for those of us listening remotely, with Kat and her cast as they work on a brief exercise using new text for the play. They'd like to share this process with you to show how they've been working on this exploration and how the play has evolved to this point. So, Kat, over to you.
Thanks, Kate. Can I just get the company back on stage? Assume your positions, please. So just as to contextualize what's about to happen, I decided I wanted to throw the cast into some very hot water. They haven't really seen the lines that their characters are going to be saying. They've seen them once, and that was just for a cold read. And the reason I wanted to have the audience see what we're doing is because too often the theatre making process is assumed as, oh no, that's easy. I've got a voice, I've got a face, I've got emotions, I can cry when you tell me to cry, so it ought to be easy. But what we saw in the introductory package was that as much as this is a thing that everybody can do, switching genres and also switching languages is in and of itself an academic exercise. So if you will indulge us for about the next 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, we will be having the cast read a scene that is scene 4. So there's a scene in the middle from what you just watched to where we are here, and this is week 4. Scene 4, which is a week later.
Scene 4. A week later. Meriti is sitting at the downstage right table with a bucket, a bouquet of flowers, and a toothbrush. They are washing the flower petals by hand. On the upstage center table lies Mpoke's bag with the shirt hanging out of it. He stands downstage left by the phone booth with a series of pamphlets stuffed in and sticking out of his pockets. He reads one and then pulls out of his pockets as if cross-checking the facts. Pedro is sitting on the stage playing the ukulele, albeit tunelessly and humming cheerily. Heidi walks in from the toilet with an empty glass.
I suppose that's why they're dumped in water if they're taken out of the soil. Perhaps, as Pencil says,
That's the nature of things when they are moved.
I don't recall saying that.
You'd assume that you were here when the words were pronounced.
And so, does that make them true?
It's natural that things that feed off the land would die when they are removed. Look only at the way the sun turns the sunflowers, or the way that the moon makes the seas shift and change. This thing called nature, with all the planets and their moons, is a wonder that you can't quite sum up in digging and dunking.
You said the land. What does the moon or the sun have to do with being on the land?
You're being literal. In all my time here, I haven't known you to be like Hazel. What's coming over you?
That's the second time that you said my name as if you had a point to make.
I'd make it if you weren't so quick to jump in and tell me things right out about my
Will you start howling and wailing again? Should I tread with caution of a farmer on a bed of recently sown seeds? What is the idea now?
In response to your challenge, you'll be surprised to know that of the land doesn't actually just refer to the soil. Certainly, yes, the four layers of the earth each have their own traits, much like the four of us here. I won't be quick to tell anyone who they are. It's rather unbecoming and presumptive.
Yes. We all have some right to defining ourselves.
So you think.
Does it work?
You've tried it then?
Earlier, yes. It seems I don't know where my phone is.
When was the last time you used your phone? Sorry? When was the last time you made use of it here?
Don't think I have used it since I got here. Ted, hammer.
Alright, let's take from the top. At this point, I need everyone to have as their intention to stab whoever they're directing their lines to. Yeah? So we're not friends, we're forced enemies. Pedro, you really dislike this one. So it needs to come out. We're fighting with most of your words. Yeah? People get a sense of disorientation. You're losing it. So you're now seeking support, which is something that the character doesn't do. Yeah? Okay, let's take it from, I think also we've raised our status up to number 8, 7, 8. So we're no longer the ditzy one.
Yeah.
We're dominated. So
I suppose that's why they're down to water if they're taken out of the soil. Perhaps, as Pedro says, that's the nature of things when they are moved.
okay, even with that thing, that, as Pedro says, mocking. So poking at maybe, yes, you know.
I suppose that's why they're down to water if they are taken out of the soil. Perhaps, as Pedro says, that's the nature of things when they are moved.
I don't recall saying that.
You'd assume that you would hear when the words were pronounced.
And so, does that make them true?
It's natural that things that feed off the land would die when they are removed. Look only at the way the sun turns sunflowers, or the way that the moon makes the seas shift and change. This thing called nature, all the planets and their moons, is a wonder that you can't quite sum up in digging and dunking.
You said the land. What does the moon or the sun have to do with being on the land?
You're being literal. In all my time here, I haven't known you to be like Pedro.
Okay, and again, with that you're being neutral. It's a judgment, and then you double judgment by judging down. This is a person you collectively decided you didn't like 2 days ago, well, a week ago. So, so, so bring it out. Yeah, let's take it from digging and ducking. It's a wonder you can't sum up in digging and ducking top of baby.
This thing called nature, with all the planets and their moons, it's a wonder that you can't quite sum up in digging and ducking.
You said the land. What does the moon or sun have to do with being on the land?
You're being literal. In all my time here, I haven't known you to be like, here too. What's coming over you?
That's the second time you said my name as if you had points to me.
I'd make it if you weren't here. I'd make it if you weren't here. Sorry. I'd make it if you weren't so quick to jump and tell me things drag out about you.
Tell me possibly get in. Will you start your howling and wailing?
Okay? That howling way like she did the very first time you met her. Oh! Will you start to howl? Right? So help us revisit. So howl and wail. Well, as you deliver the line, so you're mocking the behavior that she's already exhibited.
With the whole line or
Just at the point where you will you start okay. Again, we're stabbing each other like side by side, you're all paying attention to each other right
now. Will you start howling and wailing again? Should I tread with questionable mama on a bed of recently sown seeds?
Gender on that line, right? So you're mockingly asking, so must this treat you like this precious little thing now? Are you precious now? Yeah. So turn it down to the should I before coming back. And then we'll run until the end of the next page.
Will you start howling and wailing again? Should I tread with caution about farmer on a recently Should I tread with caution about farmer on a bed of recently sown seeds? Is that the idea now?
In response to your challenge, Meriti, you'll be surprised to know that of the land doesn't actually just refer to soil. Certainly, yes, the four layers of the earth each have their own traits, much like the four of us here. I won't be quick to tell anyone who they are. It's rather unbecoming and presumptive.
Yes, we all have some right to finding ourselves.
So you think.
It doesn't work.
You tried it then.
Earlier, yes. It seems I don't know where my phone is.
When was the last time you made use of it here?
I don't think I've used it since I got here. Did? Have I?
It looks like we're back where you started.
That can't be.
And why not? Because we're not into nature. Even in nature, tides turn.
Something they have in common, perhaps. Don't be quick to paint me that way.
Quick?
Is that not what I said?
And what makes you think the cloud will move with the huh?
I'd not be one to lie to you. Not like this.
Not like what?
The sensible question would be, like whom?
I suppose.
Still, you were talking about nature.
What about it?
You said my flowers died.
What are the flowers?
Okay, let's take it back to good with confusion. Take it back to I'm not being on slide 2. Please see how fast to pick up on, and it's on the next page, which is the fast to pick up with the flowers, the greetings and blossoms. that at the end. So taking it from Hazel, I don't be one.
I would not be one to lie to you. Not like.
Not like what?
The sensible question would be, like who?
I suppose.
Still, you were talking about nature.
What about
You said, my flowers, but are they flowers or creatures of blossoms? Are you a friend or the creatures of a nuisance? Lily Salmon. What would you think they'd call us?
You could just ask me.
A mistress and a minstrel.
Such a plan. Such gallantry. Kwamagas. What with the cut down with the twisted bitterness of tea?
Okay, again, that's a kind of, you remember, so we're dodging actual fight. Yeah, so it's still very such a plan, such guarantee, because you're playing off the mention of mistresses and mistresses. If you could, Adi, complicate who is the mistress, who's the minstrel between you two. Yes, so who's number one, who's number two? Who's serving who now? Yes? Okay. Let's do this last slide. You said my flowers, and then you will call it a search.
You said my flowers.
And we'll need to use our big voices because we now have praying.
You said my flowers, but are they flowers or the creatures of blossoms? Are you afraid of the creatures of the nuisance? Lily Salmon. What would you think they'd call us then?
You could just ask me.
And mistress and the mistress.
Such love. Such gallantry. Kwamagas. What with the cut down with the twisted bitterness of tea?
Better to be united with friction.
And you think you know it. Ha,
There's no need to be so awkward. I suppose you do it. Otherwise, how will it be?
Still, what would you be waiting for? Nothing has grown here in a while.
Good. Well, we go.
How long has it been then?
What?
How long has it been?
Since what?
Since anything. Was it yesterday that we sat on the tabletop? Or the day before that we sat through Jesus with the length of city? Amazing! I think I carried over.
Nancy, thank you very much. I know we have people reading minds. And before we hand over to questions coming from the audience as well as from both audiences. So firstly, I would just like to say, hi please, are y'all there?
Here, yes.
Okay, great. I hope you all got to hear that.
Yes.
Plus, how is that? Working with fresh text?
Yes.
What do you think that your characters are you seeing something in how your characters? I know I explained something, but are you seeing something in how your characters are essentially in the space of limbo, losing their orientation, they're losing their bearings. So if you were to, in the event of us running with more, you as a reading cast, how much of the world of your character are you seeing you could explore? I think that's how much of the world of your character, so right now you've only gotten to see scene 1, 2, and 4. And technically this production is going to be 1 hour, 30 minutes, much longer. I'm going for a classical, good old big script. The hope is understanding that it's going to be a marathon of two languages, a marathon of unraveling, of spiraling out of your own control while being trapped in purgatory with all these other people who you don't know. For each one of you, I'd like to find out how you imagine your character could grow or disintegrate. So what do you think could be the best for your character, and what do you think is going to be the worst for your character? How could your character go up or go down? Like, are they going to thrive at the end, or is that there's something to you?
Okay, yeah. Okay, I get a sense that from the beginning comes with a sense of confidence, understanding, but I can see him deteriorating to a point where he's completely vulnerable. But in it, there's hope that he maybe finds support or he gets a better understanding of himself. But I don't see it ending well.
We see her end is dependent on the other characters, definitely, whether or not they make it out. If they make it out, I think Louise will be fine. But I think they may actually kind of get hit by cabin fever, having 3 people in their space constantly, and they don't seem to be growing enough to get out of this in limbo space. And they are going to get frustrated. And I think that kind of mirrors also COVID, when we were all in our homes, like a majority of us experienced some sort of cabin fever.
With Khadi, I see a whole shift from where she starts. Like, she starts off as this witty girl, she's just in her own little bubble. But now, with like the scene 4, there's such a huge difference from when we started. So the way I see it is, I think she's going to become so comfortable with the space that she's in, be that she is the only character that has been there the longest and seems to not be going anywhere. I feel like somewhere, as the script progresses, she's just going to be stuck in one place. I'm kind of getting a feel of her becoming a bit of one of the characters, just a little bit of like somebody big. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
With Peto, I think eventually they will explode. Peto is holding in a lot of anger that they don't. They keep on trying to hold back from saying things, from expressing themselves fully. So I think definitely eventually there will be some sort of breaking point.
Cool. Thank you very much. Could I please just get another round of applause for my on stage? Do we have any questions from the virtual audience? And live audience is also invited to pose questions about the process, about the characters, anything at all. We've got about 30 minutes at our disposal. Any questions? No questions?
Thank you all for a wonderful reading. I wanted to ask, I think, for the writer, director, and also for you guys as well, the kind of timelessness of the space is really tricky. Like, it was tricky for me to watch the experience. Like, no one knows how long they've been there. People keep showing up,
It's coming and going, and it's like, oh no, she's like that. It's just like the nature of the space. Do you guys feel like, or is there a thing where you'll ever get out, like will it ever get out? Because I'm worried.
Thank you for that. So the question was, in the trickiness of the space, do we think any of the characters will ever get out? And I don't want to give away too much. Because, so I think this is the thing that I've been very adamant about, is not giving.
Can I get you a change of that?
Yes, yes, please. So I've been quite adamant about, even in the synopsis, not writing a translation of the title of the play. Because what I discovered through the deep dives around what grief does is, yes, to some degree you become a shadow of yourself, but also you start fearing points where you see light, because when you see light, it will pass the shadow, and that shadow is more often than not a reminder of the darkness. So will you go towards the light, or do you go back towards the darkness? In the cafe, as you mentioned, people arrive, and Meriti also mentions that there's a phone that hasn't rung, so so with the sense of the cafe and how it's super, super pitched, I can't wait to have the budget to build the set. Because it is also very, it's tricky in that it is a throwback to the 90s, it's a throwback to 90s television style sitcom, and still in that we don't know what's going on. And so what I've said to the cast has been one of the things that I thought of, is you keep hearing, don't walk towards the light. You see the tunnel and then don't walk towards the light, and it's like, okay, but I am walking towards the light, and then, whoo, a door pops up out of nowhere, and what do? I go inside. Now, once you're inside, are you going to get the chance to go towards the light and leave, or do you get to go the other way? So I'm happy to some degree that it has caused that sense of discomfort. Folks, are you guys leaving the space, or?
I don't think Khadi is going to leave in the space anytime soon.
Meriti definitely is leaving the space, but it might cause conflict if I not leaving.
Keto is there. They are gonna be there. I mean, they are gonna see everyone come and be right in. So.
He gets the call until the puddle of mess. He gets the call, but then another version of broken lives. Broken down to another puddle, because it's absurd. So, but he will be.
All right, do we have something from our virtual audience here? Okay.
We don't. I actually have a question for you, Kat, if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just remember over the course of the residency, how much your ideas about this piece have evolved. And I think from my perspective, some of that has to do with the natural progression of beginning an ambitious piece like this. And some of it has had to do with the practical considerations of adapting to the changing conditions from COVID. And as I was listening to the play today, I was thinking back to your ideas about ritual and the elements of earth, fire, water, and air. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you've carried through in the current incarnation of the play, and your choices surrounding the forms of absurdism, Afrofuturism, etc.
Thank you. So it's very interesting because I got to have the conversation of what this production could have been with some of the cast members. The initial idea, and not to dwell too much on it, was to have a whole world which would in and of itself be a healing, cleansing space. So a form of purgatory that you would then have to go through as the audience member in order to help you face some of your own shadows. So the element that was to be wind, the hope was to have a dance piece choreographed to it, so the sense of surrendering to that element. And that wind has, in some degree, translated into the character of Heidi, who at times gets light, but we start seeing how torrential they become. And they are potentially going to become the tornado within this tiny little space. And we don't know who they're going to swallow. The element of water was to be one of my favorite things. It was inspired by something from Twitter or Facebook. And it was the idea of we spend so much time being strong and wanting to hang out for brunches and have parties and everything is great. But how great would it be if you could just have a waiting room or a waiting party where you just come in and you just cry. And nobody asks you why you're crying, nobody asks you if you're okay. The fact is you come here, as much as you go to the club to dance, you come to this space to just let the waters wash over you. In the hopes that you will leave all of that stuff here and you will walk out and be dry in the sun. And that would be this character, who thinks they are the ocean, who thinks they are the sea, who thinks they can swallow everything, as we know the ocean and sea to be like. But in Goke, slowly but surely realizes that they are made up of droplets. So they will break down into each and every single one of those droplets before they can then remember that they once were an ocean. And the earth element, before I get to the earth element, I guess I will go to the fire. No, it's the earth element. The earth element is more to be something like this, which is to be more classical, standard theatre, scripted work. The audience would get brought into watch a scene, and in that scene, at least get the very, very, beat you over the head with it. This is theatre. And also just a moment where you could step away from yourself and surrender and watch something. So again, the idea that it is only in being able to, sometimes you can't even confront the things we're going through. So let's transpose it onto other bodies and see how those bodies are handling things. And that earth element is over here in the form of Meriti, who is this ever-present being who's there all the time, is the thing that grounds this space, makes this space what it is. The reason the ukulele is there, nobody knows why, because nobody actually plays it. The reason there's a jukebox, that there's no music playing, but everybody keeps saying, hey, let's play some music. The reason you meet them in scene 4 and they are washing fake flowers instead of having real flowers. And then we have the fire elements, which was to be then the burning of things and the surrendering of anything, whether it's joys that you are holding on too long onto that then prevent you from being able to find other joys, or if it's the toxic behaviors, or if it is, the trifling ex or whoever, whatever it is, being able to set it on fire and let it go, and maybe dance in the cinders. And that is what we get through the character of Pedro, who essentially is the parent, comes in as a pseudo-parent. And that pseudo-parenting is wanting to micromanage and therefore be needed because you are there. And that is the thing with fire, right? Fire can be very, very violent, or it can be the one thing that brings community. And the pseudo-parent character, for me, was important to have in that I didn't want to just have I didn't want to just have the characters be beings in the spaces. They all have their own complexes. They all represent something that we have right now in our lives. And I think we need to be able to have other ways of getting them out of ourselves in order to come back into ourselves. So I had originally hoped to have a whole world built for you. Then the curfews changed everything. And in the curfew coming down to the 8 p.m. curfew, it then made it impossible to even imagine putting together a production that would have been with people who weren't working 24 hours with me. And so you weren't waking up in the morning and coming to do this work, so would have had to wait until after 5 p.m. And 5 p.m. until 8 p.m., including 1 hour each side for travel, leaves you with 1 hour in the middle. And you can't create in that space. So I had to surrender that original big world idea. It's on the shelf, it's not given up on. But this has also been a reminder of Plato gave me the world. Plato said, here, run. And then I said, okay, I'm going to run. And then Hosanna said, whoa. Yes, who cares about you being an artist? Stop. And it was having to work to the point of not creating a COVID game, because I didn't want to write a retaliation to what I was going through, what my fellow artists were going through, and what we are seeing happen across the world. I'm fortunate enough to be able to create this work, and I wanted to at least give this work to be something that could be speaking back to these times, but not necessarily speaking about these times. If there are questions. So, it's been a bit of a tricky experience, especially in the way that things started. I'm not sure if these people are supposed to know each other or they're not supposed to know each other. It seems to be strangers who have relationships, but do they have relationships? And I think when you brought up a point of some sort of particular from social media, which this is kind of happens a lot, where you're never really sure who has a relationship with who is safe with who, and who is safe in whose space. So I'm kind of wondering, this space particularly that we find the characters in, is it meant to be safe? Are they meant to have relationships? Are they meant to be safe in each other? Is there another question? Otherwise, I will just respond to that. Okay, so the space isn't necessarily meant to be safe because and again, in that thing of how we do grief, we might gravitate towards people who are going through the same terrible things we are, only because then we get to revel in how bad their situation is as opposed to our situation. And I wanted to develop that sense of what does it look like when you make friendships that could actually just lead to your own detriment? But again, are they meant to be here? Yes. They are meant to arrive through that door. but now it's about making the choices about how and who they are when they leave. Because the folk will only bring when they've reached a point of self-knowledge, or at least self-acknowledgement. So you won't get out just because you think, hey, I know, I really need to be kinder to myself. It's like, okay, no, that's a good thing. That's the start, but that's not why you're here. If you are like a substance user and then you use the substance a lot, but you're not using the substance to numb your pain because you don't actually have pain. You're just using it for that. What is it? What is the other thing? What is the thing that you're like? You'll get high so that you like don't think as much, or you'll get drunk because you don't want to think as much. But also, it's not that you're worried about the thinking. It's something else. So what is that something else? And if you can't put your finger on that something else, you're not getting out. And that's kind of the thing with grief, is unless you get to the point of, but what am I really grieving? Am I grieving loss? Or am I grieving friendship? Or am I just grieving the fact that, and I'm sorry, I'm going to give a trigger warning about this next statement. It could be seen as very, very dark. But one of the things that I also realized in the process was that some folks who I was comfortable enough to be having these conversations with, and who are comfortable enough to be having these conversations with me, recognize the fact that to some degree we started envying the dead. And it was the thing that at least you're gone, you don't have to go through this anymore. And too often, that's then the space you get stuck in, is imagine if I wasn't here. And it's not necessarily being suicidal, it's not even death ideation, it's not suicide ideation. It's just, oh, imagine that friend I miss who isn't here, but at least they're not here. Got a question up there? Okay.
But I just wanted to ask, like, in terms of people who don't necessarily know, like, because the fact it's a bit of high ground. So, for someone who maybe is studying never really know what that happening, I'm speaking to myself because it's really also like, but what is it? Like, it's anything else, like, okay, like, there is another shit, or something, like, what is that, you know, the concept of
So, Cost, please could you give a, I've forgotten the name, the summary thing that we used to use for English literature. The website. The older people will know this. SparkNote, there we are. Cost, please could you give a SparkNotes version of Meriti? Like what's going on? Where are we? What is happening? Who are you? What's going on? Romeo and Juliet is a story about a boy and a girl who like each other, but their families hate each other and they end up killing each other because they love each other. And it's based on an Italian play.
Part of the challenge of doing a spark note with it is obviously we haven't done the whole thing. And it's been exploring a lot, just the idea of grief and the different aspects of it and the difficulty of it. But one thing that would always be touched on is you've got to have an understanding of where it comes from in terms of stylistically. So absurd theatre, so it has a very psychical nature. It seems simple, but it's very complex beneath it. So you'll see very snappy, quick discussions, but there's deeper ideas and there's deeper concepts and there's deeper levels of unpacking that need to happen.
And then obviously the title itself, I think you also got to look into every word. Kat is someone who really, nothing is by mistake. Even a comma, even an ellipsis, nothing. Even though she's still working on the play, but nothing's by mistake. So even in the title itself, maybe. So you think of movie PK, you get what I mean? So what does that speak back to in terms of so that would be the best way I can answer it, but it's a very difficult thing to answer because it's still, we are also discovering it as we go.
Yes. So where are you?
Okay. We're in a cafe in limbo between, like, it kind of seems like we're passing through, like, in between death, like, deciding whether or not we're going to live, and, like, go back to the real world or to the afterlife. So it's an in limbo space. And just to go back to the cyclical nature of absurdism, the more we read the play, the more we kind of understood it. It's not a once-off kind of thing. And we've been looking at this script for almost a month now, 4 weeks. And it always goes back to the same things, to the same theme. Even the little, as it was said, there were words that she picked up on. The waiting was brought back. We go back to people get speaking about like the natural elements. It's just a lot of cyclical things. It's the same thing happening over and over again in a different way, up until somebody, one of the characters, makes it up. And it could go either way, as Kat said. That's why Kat, I think, was able to ask us, how do you think this is going to end? Because we actually have no idea.
Chasing shadows.
Shadows.
Chasing shadows that are
Yes.
constantly shifting. So each character's trying to chase and make sense of shadows, but also their own shadow. And how do you make sense of your own shadow?
Yeah, so shadows can blend, but it doesn't stop them from being cast by two different or three different beings. You might just see one thing, but what happens when can you break apart a shadow? And if you can't, then what do you have to wait for in order to see its constituent parts? Is that a hand for that? And let's just check in with New York before we can wrap this.
I am not seeing any questions from our online audience. So there's wonderful questions coming to you in the theater. I think you should continue on there if you have more.
We've got one last one. Anyone who wants to be our final questioner? No one? Okay, so we're going to sit in it. Thank you very much. I think I will have Kate do a wrap, and then I will do the closeout for us this evening, or this afternoon.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank again the Meriti cast for your wonderful performances and generously allowing us into your work process, to Kat for this amazing work, and for putting together such a wonderful presentation. And again, I just want to encourage those of you joining to visit our website and get to know all of the artists in this program. Kat, it's such an honor to work with you, and I will turn it back over to you to close us out today.
Thank you so much, Kate, and don't be afraid of, once I've been vaccinated, having me come to New York. I'm very ready for it. To the cast of, the original reading cast of the movie, I've been very excited about the fact that I get to do that. As Danduka stated, I'm going back to good old theatre that is written by playwrights and put onto paper. And the hope is one day somebody will be sitting and reading this and having to study the language and having to unpack the symbology. Because if for nothing else, we don't do this because we can. It is also part of legacy building. So I just wanted to say, when we go to print, your names are going to be in the booth. And so I really want to say thank you. We will do it in order of appearance. You might have seen that also the poster is in order of appearance. So firstly, to Laura Sokawale, who brought the first voice to Meriti, thank you. To Anna Darling, who brought the first voice to Meriti, thank you. Susanna Lemoyle, who brought the first voice to Kato, thank you. To Lepopada, who brought the first voice to, what's it? Nkoke? Yeah. We can get it. Thank you very much. And more than anything else, I would like to thank the person who has done a very simple but very difficult task to do under working with me, and that is Jessica, Lebahan Jessica Kedebaman, who has been my stage manager, who you have communicated with as the live audience. Thank you for being there for me and giving me space to imagine that I don't have to carry it all. And to somebody who has not just made it a thing for me to imagine, but has reminded me constantly. No, Jessica, no, Jasmine McCarthy, I always called her by her name. No, Jasmine McCarthy for the videographic work, for the photographic work. You have only seen a bit of it this evening, so there will be a bigger body of the chronicles of the making of this work. And I'm really, really grateful to Katlego, the Play Company in New York, to my fellow residents, Johnny Carlos, Zena Mujallo, and Daima Mubarak, for being there and being part of this like sisterhood of four and creating art that is so intelligent. And thankfully, we haven't been doing it to be smart. We're doing it because we've been given the time to invest in the creation of work we believe in. So I would like to, with those words, say thank you very much. Thank you for supporting theatre. Theatre is not dead, it's just resting. Don't be afraid of like filling out all the theatres, even with an audience as well, fill them out and support the arts, because what are we without artistic expression? Thank you very, very much.